Good morning, everyone. This is my first Node Interactive, so I'm really excited to be here. As Michael mentioned, my name is Jonathan Carter. I'm from Microsoft. And in this talk, what I want to cover is some of our learnings and experiences with our customers using Node.js in the cloud and in the enterprise. And particularly, I want to show off some work that we've been doing in Visual Studio Code and Azure to help make the developer experience a little bit better for everyone. So as we've all seen over the last few years, the explosive growth of Node.js is very clear, and particularly its rise in the enterprise has also been very significant. At Microsoft, we've also seen a similar growth in the number of Node.js apps being deployed to Azure. Throughout that time, we've been able to work with a lot of really amazing organizations, some of which are listed here. And when we've talked to them about their motivations for why they chose Node.js for deploying to the cloud with their production workloads, we ended up hearing very consistent themes, many of which we've all probably heard as well. That JavaScript's ubiquity, its applicability to full-stack development, the extremely prolific community that surrounds it, all leads to one of, if not the most productive and collaborative platforms today. And as organizations are looking to embrace new industry trends to transform their business with things such as IoT or microservices, having a platform that you can get up to speed quickly, be productive, and be very iterative is as important for your bottom line as anything else. So Node.js just makes sense for the enterprise, absolutely. Now, one other thing that we also heard very loud and clear when we talked to many of our customers is that even though the Node.js platform in the community, this clicker doesn't seem to be working, is doing an amazing job with delivering on all of these promises, that it's important for, is the clicker not working? Okay, sorry about that. That it's important for the ecosystem of tools and cloud services to also evolve and support those same trends so that any productivity gains that you got by using Node.js aren't lost. And so particularly when we've spoken with some of our Azure customers, we've heard three things. That developer tools need to be fast and iterative, regardless how complex or simple the application is. So whether it's a mean stack app, whether it's microservices, whether it's polyglot, it needs to be fast and it needs to be iterative, because otherwise the tooling can get in the way. That deployment to the cloud needs to provide simple but flexible solutions based on OSS products, all of which is based on the standard of containers as the artifact for deployment. And finally, that production monitoring is simple, actionable, and that identifying potential issues in production can be as simple and intuitive for developers in the environment that they're in every day, particularly their IDE. So what I want to do now is jump into a demo. And I want to show off how with Visual Studio Code and Azure, we've been trying to help improve those three themes for Node.js development. So for this demo, I'm going to use a simple tutorial app from the guys at Scotch.io. So I'll go ahead and clone that project. And then I'm going to open this up in VS Code. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Visual Studio Code, and I'm not going to install this adapter because I don't need it, it's an open source cross-platform editor that wants to fit into your existing workflows while adding productivity enhancements, but not becoming too overweight, right? And so an example of something that we want to do is give you ways to not have to switch context unnecessarily. So even though I have my awesome terminal here, I'm using Hyper from the Zeit guys, which is amazing. Here, if I want to bring up an integrated terminal, I can simply, within here, without having to switch away, run yarn, pull down my dependencies, and go. Another example of an integrated experience simplicity feature that VS Code has is you'll notice over here an integrated Git experience. So I can say, hey, I just added yarn and commit that. Once again, I could use the Git CLI, but VS Code provides that in the box to make it simpler and easier to have that tight iterative loop. So one thing that we hear very clearly from developers all the time is that the authoring experience of applications needs to be better, needs to be easier, quicker, particularly as the application grows. And so one thing that VS Code does is provide a really great authoring auto-completion experience out of the box. So if as you noticed, I cloned this project, and without having to do anything, I can immediately get auto-completion on all Node.js APIs. And the way this is working is that VS Code transparently is downloading TypeScript typings files to drive the semantics that it needs to understand the shape of APIs. So the first thing that let's do is, like all good 12-factor apps, let's convert this MongoDB connection from using a hard-coded string to using an environment variable. So we'll say process.env, and we'll say Mongo URL. Awesome. Additionally, let's configure Mongoose. And you notice as I'm typing that, I'm getting auto-completion on Mongoose as well. And that's the same auto-acquisition of TypeScript typings that I just mentioned. It doesn't work just for Node.js built-in APIs. It works for over 2,000 third-party libraries as well. So what I want to do is just tell Mongoose not to tank whenever it can't connect to the database. So we'll say, oh my god. OK. So awesome. Super lightweight, super productive editing experience. But what about running this application? So let me hit F5. And you'll notice here that VS Code says, hey, what kind of app do you want to make this? So I'm going to say Node.js experimental. And what that means is it's going to configure it to use the new node inspect debugging capability. So it generates this launch.json file, which you notice it's smart enough to understand what our start script is, server.js. I'm going to hit F5. And you'll notice now our app is listening. So if I come over here, here's the app. Debug some stuff. Speak at Nina. I guess I already did that, or I am doing it. And that's all cool, right? So without having to configure anything, I'm now running my application. I'm seeing my output logs. But what would be even better is if I could debug this application directly within the editor. So let me jump to my routes, particularly here where I post a new to-do. I'll just come back here and say test. And as soon as I do that, I hit the breakpoint. Now, if I switch to the debug tab, I have everything that you would expect in a debugger. I can hover over expressions and see what their state is. I can use the debug console with auto-completion to evaluate expressions live. My locals watches, call stack, everything works, right? But this app is a mean stack app. And so as I mentioned in the beginning, tools and the inner loop needs to evolve in order to help support application development to be easier. And so what I want to do is show off a brand new feature that we just checked in a few days ago, which enables the ability to debug front and back end code. So let me just drop in this for the sake of time. And now I'm going to select this full stack option and hit F5 again. And now what happens is it's going to run the Node.js app. It's also going to launch Chrome. Let me just refresh that. Everything's still working. Cool. I already had the breakpoint in the backend code, but let me go into my AngularJS code and set a breakpoint in the controller here. So I'm going to do one more test. You'll notice Chrome says, hey, we're paused in VS Code. So now I'm broken in front-end JavaScript. You'll notice in the call stack window, we actually see these two parallel nodes, one for Node, one for Chrome. And I'm currently paused in Chrome. Once again, I can see expression values. I can evaluate expressions in the console, etc. Now, what's even cooler is if I hit run, I now transition from the front end to the back end code. So now I'm debugging Node.js code. You'll notice that the call stack shows that. And once again, everything just works. Now this capability works really great for full stack JavaScript apps. But if this was also a polyglot microservice app, VS Code has extensions for Java, for C#, for Ruby, for Go. And this same ability to jump between tiers and even languages would work just the same. And so we think that's a big capability to enable that fast iterative loop for complex applications. OK. So let's do something else. So as has been mentioned today, and we've all heard the craze of containers, right? Everybody wants to run their apps as Docker. It gives you that repeatable, easy deployment capability. But it may be intimidating to get started Dockerizing or containerizing your app. So in VS Code, you can install the Docker extension. And then what I can just do is say, Docker, add a Docker file to my workspace. And I'm going to say it's Node.js. The port that this app is exposing is 8080. And what that does is it goes off and configures a Docker file. Docker compose files automatically for me. So I didn't have to go learn how to do that. I could just kind of say, get it going. But even better, we have a good authoring experience for Docker files as well. So here I'll say Michael Hart, and I'm going to use the great Alpine Node, you see it has 248 stars, image as the base, because it's a lot slimmer than the core Node image. So now I'll say Docker build, and I'll tag it, lost in tangent is my Docker Hub alias. It's going to go off and build that image. And once again, I could have used the Docker CLI directly. I could have gone and used my own separate terminal. But these commands that the Docker extension adds just tries to help make that inner loop a little bit more iterative and a little more tight. So now finally, I'm going to say Docker push. And we'll push that image up to Docker Hub, right? And so now we've authored, we've debugged, we containerized this application. Now what I want to do is move it to the cloud. So in Azure, we have a whole bunch of different service options for compute and storage. But our main web and API PaaS solution is called App Service. And we just recently released support for running Linux VMs in App Service. But we've also just released support for being able to deploy your app as a container to App Service. That way, if you're embracing Docker and containers, that deployment artifact, that standard, you can carry with you even if you want to get the benefits of a PaaS solution. So we also just recently released a brand new CLI for Azure that we hope makes it much more friendly for developers to manage their cloud infrastructure. And so for example, what you can do is you can say AZ app service web create, give it a name. Oh, the name is Nina Demo. Specify the namespace that it goes in, and that's it. And by running this one command, I would now have a PaaS platform that's capable of deploying a container to. Now, I already created that for the sake of time, but what I want to do is configure it to use the container that we just pushed. So I'm going to say app service web config container update. The name of it is Nina Demo. The namespace it's in is Nina Demo. And the container is, okay, that was nice. Let's try that again. App service web config container update Nina Demo, and the container is lost in tangent /node. Yeah, I was hyping up Hyper, and then all of a sudden it has this rendering issue. Okay, so what we just did is we configured that to just pull our container that we deployed to Docker Hub and spin that up. So let's say app service web browse Nina Demo. So it's going to launch that PaaS-based service that we just deployed our container to. So here we go. I'm a to-do-aholic, as we all are. But unfortunately, you'll notice that it's spinning. And the reason is because the MongoDB instance that I had running locally is not available on the cloud. And so what we need to do is configure the environment variable that we specified. So I could go off and deploy my own instance of DocDB or MongoDB, but in Azure we actually have a PaaS-based solution that makes this simple to manage, it's geo-replicable, and makes it just that much easier for you to have to build your applications. So I already provisioned that up in the portal. So we'll come in here, I'll say getting started, and on the Node.js tab, I'm going to go ahead and just grab this connection string, and I'm going to go back to my app service instance, which is right here, and select this. And what we want to do is just simply create that Mongo URL environment variable and set it to the connection string that I got from the DocDB instance. So in a second, that should be successfully created. And so now the effect is that just like a 12-factor app, changing config is just like changing code. The net effect is that when I refresh this app, it actually should be able to connect successfully to DocDB. So we'll test this, and now that works. And so as the throughput demands on my application or my data layer grow, I can go back in here, and the beauty of DocDB, as I mentioned, is that I can scale it without having to do any of that management. So I can just come in here and say, hey, the to-dos collection, I need to double, triple, increase the throughput. I need to replicate it to South America, etc. And I don't have to worry about how any of that works. Okay. So with that demo, right? Kind of highlighted some of the basics of VS Code, showed how, hey, we want to make full stack development simpler for polyglot full stack apps. We want to make it easy to containerize your applications and then deploy them to the cloud by using simple PaaS-based solutions, but also using Docker as that standard deployment artifact. So let's switch back to the slides. So just to kind of wrap up, if you haven't seen or you aren't familiar with VS Code or Azure, and you thought any of what I just showed was interesting, I would encourage you to go check it out, azure.com/node. But also, please come and talk to us. We'll be at the booth all week. That's my email, GitHub, and Twitter information. The more feedback and the more collaboration that we have with the community and our customers, the better. Right? So almost everything I showed today is already open source. And we have quite a bit more things that we're working on that I wasn't able to capture, that we really, really, really want to work with the community as much as we can because we love Node.js and we just know that the potential of it is just extremely great. So with that, that's all that I have. So I really appreciate it and hope to talk to you guys later in the week.